So we're going to start off tonight with a honey oat sandwich loaf. Joy is baking bread, although I think for a lot of people it can maybe feel a little bit intimidating sometimes depending on how much time you've spent in the kitchen. But you're here to show us the way with this really versatile, beautiful loaf of bread. So take it away.
Yes, and this is a really great entry-level loaf of bread because our stand mixer is really going to do all the work.
Does all the work, and yeah, okay, we're gonna, yeah, there's some really interesting little parts to this, so let's get started.
Okay, so we have our oat beverage, also known as oat milk. I've pre-warmed it so that the yeast will activate a little quicker.
We're going to be using Manitoba oats in this recipe as well, but the oat milk, very, 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 very good chance that the oat milk and the oat beverages that we consume, that we use in our baking, chances are the oats were actually grown right here in Manitoba, or Western Canada anyway, which is kind of cool. So
Next up, we have honey, of course, the recipe called honey oat.
Gotta have it.
And then our yeast. And we'll just mix that in together. Honestly, you don't really need to do this step, but because the stand mixer is doing all the heavy lifting, I sometimes feel like I want to be involved a bit. So just kind of
give it all up
mix
to
it together.
the appliance, you know? You got to take responsibility for oneself. Yeah. Okay. And so, do you also warm the milk so that that kind of makes that honey a little bit easier to sort of like, you know, to combine the two of those things together?
Yeah, it'll incorporate a lot better that way. And then we have some canola oil.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, again, another locally produced ingredient or a locally grown ingredient.
2 eggs.
Oh yes, of course. It's just endless, right? So Countryside Farms, free run Vita eggs. Wonderful that we're able to use that in our bread tonight as well.
We have the salt.
Being a little bit stubborn.
Stubborn today.
You got it.
Okay. And this is the surprise ingredient I was talking about. So these are leftover mashed potatoes.
That's what I thought it was.
Yes. You can use either peeled or pre-peeled. Either one works. And the reason that we're using it is that the potato starch attracts water and it will result in a softer, fluffier loaf of bread.
Okay, yeah. Keeps it a bit moist for longer too, I've heard, so.
And then our oats.
There they are.
And here I'm going to show you how to properly measure flour. When we are baking bread, we want to be a little bit more exact with our measurements than when we're cooking. So you'll take a spoon and then just fill it up this way. So we're not packing it in. And then you can take a knife and level it off.
Yeah.
So
I've always used the knife. I've used that, but I always just like dunked the cup or the measuring cup.
Then you might end up with more flour than the recipe actually calls for.
I have learned much doing this show.
Like I said, it's super simple. The stand mixer is going to mix it all together. Once it comes together in a dough ball, you will take it out and then grease the bowl, put it back in. Once it comes together, you're actually going to let it knead for 7 minutes. And if you notice that it's not really coming together, you might need to add a little bit more flour. Perhaps it's an extra humid day.
I always get a little bit like, okay, so is this should it be shaggy? Is that kind of a good way to describe it, or it would be a little bit more?
You want it more, it actually comes together. Okay. It'll like clear the bowl and it'll come together in a nice ball. And then when that happens, like I said, we're going to grease the bowl, put it back in, and we'll put it in the fridge, and it's gonna do its long bulk fermentation in the fridge, 12 to 24 hours. So as I said, this is a really entry-level bread, and you get a lot of leeway with that 12 to 24 hours.
Well, it's also different in the way that often when, at least the breads that I've made, is that you have to let that dough rise in kind of like a warmish kind of spot. So this is like the opposite of that.
Yes, and then you don't have very much leeway on time. When it's risen, you gotta go.
Yeah.
So we have 2 loaves. So this recipe makes 2 loaves. I'm gonna give 1/2 to you. So you'll divide it in half after the bulk fermentation.
Okay.
and then we'll shape it. So I'm going to get you to just kind of press it out into a bit of a rough triangle. Not triangle,
or
rectangle.
And the one with the 4 sides, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
And then you take the part away from you and fold it down about halfway. And you want to seal the seams as you do. And then this one I call the paper airplane fold. So you're going to take it halfway and fold it to the midline. And do the same on both sides. So it's kind of like that paper airplane point. And again, then we start from the outside and then
Jessica,
Jessica,
I don't know if this is working for me.
So as you
feels
kind
good
of,
though, I'll tell you that.
As you are rolling it, you want to create some tension on the outside, and then just kind of keep rolling and pinching, and then you get a nice. Oh, yours is beautiful. You did great.
Yeah,
and then you'll have your pre-greased tin.
Okay, and we just
You
pop
it
them
in,
okay.
And you'll allow it to rise for another 2 to 4 hours at room temperature this time.
So 12 to 24 in the fridge. And what did you call it? Something ferment?
The bulk fermentation.
Bulk fermentation, and then another 2 to 4, and it should double in size?
So once it has risen 1 inch above the loaf pan, you're going to bake it in a 350-degree oven for 25 minutes. Then you'll take a piece of aluminum foil, tent it over top, bake it for a further 25 minutes. And that's just to ensure that the loaf doesn't get too brown at the top. Yeah, slice into that.
Try not to touch it with my...
And you'll see how nice and soft and fluffy this loaf of bread is.
Let's have a look.
So it's called a sandwich loaf, but it's really a great everyday loaf that you can use for toast, sunflower seed butter on it.
Okay, all kinds of great things. All right, thank you very much. When we come back, we are going to do these raisin bran muffins here on Great Taste of Manitoba. Stick around. We appreciate you, whether you're new to this channel or a long-time viewer. If you'd like to join us in the kitchen regularly and meet farm families across Manitoba, please subscribe. We share new videos every Sunday.